welcome everybody. I'm Courtney Mercer, the Executive Director of Downtown New Jersey, and we welcome you to our ongoing Downtown Management Forum series. Today we have two folks from the state of New Jersey who are going to tell you about new programs and coming back programs. Maggie Peters is going to talk about the Main Street initiatives through NJEDA, and James Simmons is going to share the news and some information about the new UBZ legislation that was passed in August. But before we get started, just a little bit for those of you who don't know Downtown New Jersey, we are a member-supported nonprofit education. We provide lots of educational opportunities with technical assistance, newsletters, these type of roundtables. Also advocacy. We will one, let you know what's going on down in New Jersey. And we will also comment as needed. And then we like to recognize our members through spotlights in our newsletter, an annual award ceremony, and through social media shares. We've been holding these virtual forums since I think the week after the shutdown. We were doing them weekly for a while. Now we've moved to monthly. All of the videos and resources, PowerPoints, anything else that came out of them are all up on our website at downtownnj.com/downtown-forums. The next forum is next Friday. We're doing two this month because Maggie's programs are particularly timely, so we didn't want to push them off till October. We have transforming brownfields into downtown assets next Friday. And then November 16th, we'll be at the League, fingers crossed. It's actually still happening in person. So far, so good. And we'll be talking about small downtown economic development. Just so everybody knows, we did move to we are asking non-members to make a donation for these workshops now, just because it is a lot of time and effort. So if you are not a member, we do hope, we're not going to come chase after you for it, but we hope you will voluntarily go to bit.ly/forum-donation and make a small donation in support of this programming. So with that, I will welcome Maggie to speak first. And I think what we'll do is we'll just go through both of the presentations, and then we'll have it come back and have a dialogue afterwards. So you're on, Maggie.
Good morning, Maggie Peters, Program Manager for the Small Business Services Unit at the NJEDA. So on August 11th, the board approved the Main Street Recovery Finance Program. Next slide. So this is a $100 million appropriation, and we're going to use it for several products. The first product that I'm going to talk about later is the Small Business Lease Grant, which is going to be the first to launch. But the $100 million appropriation will consist of grants to small businesses, loans to micro businesses, and resources to lenders and CDFIs and MDIs. Next slide, please. So the Main Street rule established two initial product offerings. So these are the first two that are going to launch: the Small Business Lease Grant, which we expect to launch by the end of by the end of September, and then the Small Business Improvement Grant after that. We have to see what volume is like for the lease grant, and then we'll move on to the improvement grant. But we do plan to launch it in the next few months. So the lease grant provides grant funding to offset a portion of lease payments for businesses leasing new or additional space. And the improvement grant is a reimbursement for business owners for costs associated with making either interior or exterior building improvements or purchasing and installing furniture, fixtures, or equipment. Next slide. So here's an overview. The Small Business Lease Grant is getting $10 million. 40% of that funding will be set aside for businesses located in eligible Opportunity Zone census tracts. The grant will offset a portion of the annual lease payments for 5-year leases. So 20% will be the first disbursement after the execution of the grant agreement with the EDA. So we'll look at the full year, your annual lease for that year, and we'll reimburse 20% of it up front. And then the second disbursement will come after 12 months of lease payments have been paid. And then we'll do the second 20%. So 40% in total, first disbursement and second disbursement. Applicants with multiple locations are limited to one application per location. And we're doing an approval fee this time of $100. So this way, nothing is paid by the business owner until they're almost through the process and are going to sign a grant agreement. So we're trying to be, keep the fees as low as possible. Next slide, please. So in terms of eligibility, it's open to commercial businesses and not-for-profits. And here are the eligibility requirements. The business must meet the SBA definition of small businesses determined by their NAICS code. We're going to need a current tax clearance certificate. The applicant has to be in good standing with our sister agencies, the Department of Labor, the DEP. They have to certify at time of application, of course, that they're not in default for any other NJEDA or state assistance. The applicant must also certify at time of application that they're going to pay wages that are the greater of $15 an hour or 120% of minimum wage. Tipped employees are required to be paid 120% of the minimum wage rate. So these wage requirements are in effect for the whole grant term. So 5 years because it's a 5-year lease. And the applicant must commit to remaining in the facility for those 5 years. Lease eligibility. 250 to 10,000 square feet of office, commercial, or retail space, minimum 5-year lease, no industrial warehouse. Only the first 10,000 of square feet is eligible for grant support. You can lease more than 10,000 square feet, but we're only going to give the grant for the 10,000. It must be a new lease or amendment or extension of an existing lease. New or amended leases have to be an expansion of at least 250 square feet larger than the prior space. It must include first floor street level spaces. We will accept leases that have like some residential upstairs or another office space upstairs or a basement space, but it has to include that street level space because this is a Main Street grant. We're checking that all the leases are market rate. So the lease must be market rate, and we have our commercial real estate information ready so that we can make sure it's within the range for that county. And the lease cannot have been executed more than 12 months prior to the application. So this is the look back. So if you can't come to us with a signed lease, it has to be an executed lease signed by both parties prior to the date of application, but within the previous 12 months, excuse me. Next slide. Applicants cannot terminate an existing lease and enter into a new lease for the same square footage to pursue this grant. This program is a successor program to our Small Business Lease Assistance Program grant. So the approval of this made that program go away. You can opt out of the predecessor program to pursue this program. There really weren't that many people, we probably did like 10 or 15 of those a year. So you are able to opt out, but this isn't going to happen a lot. Grantees that default on any lease payments or leave the space during the grant term are no longer eligible for the incentive, and they have to repay whatever it is they received from the EDA. High-tech and business incubator members in not-for-profit facilities are eligible for the grant. However, we're not going to give the grant to the independent leaseholders. So it would have to be the entity, so the operator. Landlords cannot have any ownership interest in the tenant, and the tenant would need to get certification from the landlord that they are current on all their lease payments at application. So moving on to the Small Business Improvement Grant, which is a $15 million pot of money for this program. So this will be the second program to launch. The lease grant is going to launch, this month or next month. And then after that, we'll launch this program. But these are the rules for it because it's already been approved as of August 11th. So 40% of this grant as well will be set aside for businesses located in eligible opportunity zone census tracts. It will provide grant funding equal to 50% of the total project costs. So that's a maximum of $50,000. The grant can be used for interior or exterior renovations, purchase and installation of FF&E, and the minimum project cost must be at least $5,000. For this improvement grant, it's a limit of one grant per EIN. So if an entity comes in and they have several stores, they can bundle all their expenses if it's under the same EIN and come to us, with multiple expenses for different locations, as long as they're the same EIN and, they're not over $50,000, then we can still do it. And the same thing with this, we're going to do an approval fee, not an application fee. And we're keeping it real low at $100. Okay, so eligibility. Commercial businesses and not-for-profits are eligible. A lot of the same eligibility requirements for the lease grant are the same for the improvement grant. They must meet the SBA definition of small business, rent or own and operate from the facility as a commercial business. They have to have a tax clearance, and they have to be clear with all of our sister agencies, as well as the EDA. They have to make sure that they're up to date on any money that they've received in the past, and the same minimum wage requirement for this program as well. So eligibility, we're willing to reimburse for interior or exterior building improvements. Home-based businesses may only receive reimbursement for FF&E. And the work must have been completed on or after March 9th, 2020, but no more than 2 years prior to the application date. They have to provide documentation showing, all the work that's been completed, or all the furniture, fixture, and equipment that they've bought. Total project cost $5,000. And the applicant is responsible for all of the local approvals, zoning, and building permits. Projects over $50,000 are subject to the green building standards, but only for lighting and mechanical work. If the applicant leases space, then they have to complete a form they have to make sure that their landlord completes a form and signs it, making sure that the improvements are approved by that landlord. And if a project is utilizing contractors with 4 or more employees, 4 or more employees, period, not just for this project, then they may be subject to the affirmative action requirements. Okay, so the Main Street recovery.
Maggie,
yes.
Maggie, real quick before you move on to that one, because I know it comes up. So there's no prevailing wage on this, because I know that's normally an EDA thing. Wonderful.
Nope.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Sure. So the Main Street grant applicants must be prepared to comply with the following things: the wage requirements for both programs, the green building standards for projects that are over $50,000, affirmative action if the contractor has more than 4 employees, and then commitments under this grant. There is a recapture, if you don't stay in your facility for the 5 years, if you don't pay your wage requirements. So as long as you stay in compliance with those things, and the compliance period is 5 years, then we should be okay. So this is $100 million allocation. So I've only really talked about like 25 million of it. So there's going to be a lot of pilot programs. So make sure that you have put your email into the homepage on the EDA website so that you're getting all the updates, because we're releasing these programs really fast. So the next things that you're going to see after the small business improvement grant is you're going to see working capital loans. We're going to bring back our micro business loans. So they're going to be working capital loans of up to $50,000 as they were before. We're working on, the terms and the rates and that type of thing, but they're going to be, really favorable like they were last time. And then loans to micro lenders, which we have been doing to our CDFIs and MDIs and Zone Development Corporation. So we're going to do another round of that. And just more to come, really.
Unmute myself. Great. Wonderful, Maggie. Thank you. And we'll take questions at the end. And so I'm going to move on to James. And since James doesn't have a PowerPoint, I'm going to stop screen sharing so we get to see James' full face while he tells us all about the Coming Back UEZ program.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Amen. Okay, great, great, great. Well, listen, I guess you didn't think it was going to be a horror movie on a Friday afternoon, huh? All of a sudden now you get a full face with me because I have no PowerPoint presentation, but here I am, and just try to bear with it, and small children, keep them out of the room during the course of the presentation. My name is James D. Simmons, and I'm the State Business Development Rep for the Urban Enterprise Zone program. Our Executive Director is Tracy Fredericks. And the UEZ program, which is commonly known as, has been around since 1983. It actually started doing real work in 1985, 86. So we've been around for a while. We've been around long enough to be viewed as a program that was an integral part of all economic development through a good portion of the state, and morphed into the glorified Rodney Dangerfield that gets no respect at all. And what I like to say is, with the recent legislation that just passed a few weeks ago, the reports of our death, the UEZ death, has been greatly exaggerated. The program has gotten a capital infusion of $42.5 million, $40 million that goes to to each of the 37 municipalities, 32 zones throughout the state. Many of you that may not have a lot of information about the program, if you traveled up the turnpike and driven past exit 13 where IKEA is, they have a big sign on the side that says 3.5% sales tax, or half the rate. That's one of the incentives for entities that look to be a part of the Urban Enterprise Zone program. We have over 7,600 businesses that are in the program in those 37 cities, 32 zones, and we basically have been an economic development engine stimulating jobs. Many people are under the impression the UEZ program is a tax program. It's not. It's a jobs program. It's intended to stimulate job growth in areas that have been viewed as having high unemployment rates and other issues and matters that would hinder businesses from coming in and developing or looking towards settling in those locations. So there's been a 10-year extension on the program. There were reviews that were made for over 10 years. Funds that were being generated from taxes were going towards the general fund, and now municipalities are getting access to monies again. The most recent legislation has caused some changes to the program, some significant when it comes down to some of the tax exempt status caps, or the amount of money that businesses can receive back. But the trade-off was every muni that is in the program has the ability, based on their funding, to create programs and services that are specific to their locations. So let me just say this very quickly. For individuals that may be in an urban enterprise zone city, how do you get in? First and foremost, is a 4-step process. You have to register your business with the state of New Jersey. Once you have the business registered, we have to make sure the business entity resides within an urban enterprise zone location. The third thing is that you submit an application, and that application is relatively straightforward. It's done online via the Premier Business Service system. And you have to make sure that you're in tax compliance. Business entities that have tax-related issues still have the ability to apply and be approved if they have a payment plan worked out with taxation. A lot of businesses have, in some of our urban centers in Newark and other places, didn't think they could qualify for some of the benefits the program provides because they had tax-related challenges. And that was a change that came about 7 or 8 years ago, which would allow for businesses to come out from under certain tax challenges by taking advantage of some of the benefits and hiring staff and or employees. So what I try to say to business entities that reside within urban enterprise zones is, you want to take advantage of the competitive advantage that you can obtain where you stand. The program is free. It doesn't cost any money to become a part of. There are coordinators in each and every municipality that will understand the local issues. There are businesses every day that are transitioning from home-based businesses or virtual businesses looking for a brick and mortar presence. One of the things I was hearing with Main Street and other entities is there's been a lot of construction and growth promoting first floor commercial entities. Some of these businesses making these transitions may look towards taking advantage of that. Some entities may say, hey, listen, I'm making the transition from working from home, and now I'm looking towards looking for space, but it's rather expensive. One of the suggestions that we make, and the coordinators in the local areas have the ability to offer this, is there can be partnerships and things worked out where you may have a business that's been an anchor in a community for quite some time that prior to technology, maybe they needed 1,000 square feet to do what they do. And now they have the ability to only use half of that space. You might want to look towards entering into a partnership with an entity there where it's a win-win situation for everyone. So we want to make sure that people have access to opportunities and things that are here to help local businesses. As I said before, I work out of the divisional office. I work directly under Tracy Fredericks. All the coordinators report to me, and I deal with and I'm aware of all the different dynamics that are going on with our 7,600 businesses, or at least I hope I am. And we try to be available. We try to return phone calls. We try to be accessible, and we like what we do. So anyone having any questions, I'm concluding this session right now. The Baptist preacher and me and pastor, normally we go on another 15 minutes and pass the plate, but I'm not doing that to you guys today. So I'm concluding that right now and opening it up when time allows for any questions you have about the UEZ program. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, James. I actually do have a couple of follow-up questions because I haven't read the legislation, so I was hoping you would do that work for me today. Were there any changes? So it sounds like everything stays the same from a business participant perspective. Were there any changes to the UEZ zone itself? I know there is purchasing and getting money back, and all the old programmatic stuff. What has changed?
There have been a number of changes, and that's the reason why instead of me just going through a laundry list of things that were either taken out or put in, we've noticed that the business community as a whole has had about 2 or 3 main questions that they were interested in for those parties that have reviewed the documentation. Some of the things that were added to the program, to the bill, along with municipalities having access to funding again, which is exciting for the cities. Yeah. And because of the tax variances throughout the state, we have a small zone that the most they get per year is $33,000 a year. And we have larger zones that are getting 3.8 million based on their tax base. So you have all kinds of challenging things there. The new bill, the new legislation has required each zone, and this comes from the zone assistance funds of the ZAF, to commission a 5-year plan that has the ability to specifically outline what the focus and the plan is to develop and to spur economic growth in those respective communities. Obviously, as I gave you that variance, we have zones that could not afford to do that at all. That money is looking towards being taken from that $40 million to make sure that every zone has that in place. There's certain legislation that's been put in place that's required the division, us, to step in early to make access to funding. The triggering event was once a zone created a 5-year plan and got it approved by the board, they would have the ability to start projects, get them accessed, and move on them. It's going to be in a COVID environment that we're in right now, at least a year plus before someone would have the ability to assess the current environment, speculate or extrapolate 5 years into the future, and then get that approved by the board. So what's been put in place now is we at the divisional level, working with our coordinators in the field, are putting together a series of regulations that will allow quicker access to funding. So there were changes to the way 10 years ago the funds were being accessed. They were taken out in the legislation that were started before COVID kicked in to the point that it is. And we're looking towards putting some portions of those back in order to get quick access to funding. One of the big changes that has occurred is this. One of the boons of the program was we would tell businesses that if you're in the UEZ program, you have the ability to have certain purchases and things that are tax exempt. Some businesses, especially larger entities, have been utilizing this benefit for years, and some of them to the extent of millions of dollars annually. There's a cap that has been put on, which limits the first $100,000 of those tax purchases to be limited, which basically means that that benefit has been cut to $6,650 per business. There's a lot of concern in the business community. as a result of that. But the trade-off was municipalities are getting funding now to deal specifically with concerns, and it's limiting that opportunity for businesses. For retailers, however, they're 50%, being able to charge 50% of the sales tax, which is a great incentive for people to come to them as opposed to a non-UEZ business, are still in effect. If businesses are looking, or developers are looking to come into a town and say, we want to, we were concerned about this tax issue. Hey, we're looking towards building something that's going to be $100 million, but we expected to get that $6.6 million in tax, in tax savings on our building materials. They still have that available. If you have an urban enterprise zone business that's doing substantial improvements, they qualify to still get the full benefit. The legislation also stated that if you happen to be building supermarkets in the areas that are considered food deserts, you still get the full benefit. What this largely targets are business entities that may, let's say if I'm Goldman Sachs, I'm using them as an example, and on an annual basis, they're buying new computer systems for their entities, they're buying furnishings or whatever else. And that might add up over the span of a year to $2 million in savings. They're going to be limited now to $6,650. And sorry, but that's what the bill says, and that's what we at Division have to enforce and explain. And so I'm pretty much the statewide contact on those questions. I know that was a lengthy answer. That's the Baptist preacher in me coming in again, but hopefully it's been helpful.
I think Deb has a question.
I have a question.
Yes.
So I'd also heard that companies that were already in the urban enterprise zone for 10 years could no longer participate, and only new companies could come in. And also that they eliminated the tax credits if you were hiring people who live in the urban enterprise zone. There was a $1,500 per person tax credit. Is that eliminated as well?
You asked such good questions, Deborah. I need to find out where your office is so I can come get you. No, great questions, great questions. Let me say this to make sure I can keep up on it. What was the first thing you said? Because you gave me three things.
About the elimination of the tax credit when you hire individuals who live in an urban enterprise zone. Okay. And the other one was the limit that if you were already a UEZ company for 10 years that you could no longer participate. Okay, no,
there were a lot of questions about that. There were some language issues and there were last minute changes and everything with the bill. No, the 10-year extension, there's a 10-year extension on all zones to stay in the program. That's giving people time. There are no businesses that are going to be targeted and say you've been in long enough, you need to get out. That is not what's in the final legislation. There were discussions about those types of things before the division got involved, and those changes were not a part of the final bill. So you can tell your parties not to worry about that. The other issue, there were things that were in the old bill that are in the old legislation that are not there now. You just hit on one of them. It actually came out of labor, whereas there were certain economic benefits of $1,500 or whatever that were granted for businesses that qualify for UEZ. It's not in the current legislation to the best of my knowledge. There was also for manufacturers, I believe it was done via EDA, please correct me if I'm wrong, where manufacturers that hired over 250 people could get some benefit on their energy sales tax. That's no longer in the new legislation as well. So there were a number of things that were culled out as a means of trying to make this thing economically efficient and to put monies back to the municipalities for specific issues.
So James, just as a follow-up, will you be able to post the final copy of the legislation on the website, as well as, let's say, there used to be like a UEZ brochure? Because I have a lot of companies, Patterson, Passaic, in my county, are UEZ designated cities. So I'd like to be able to promote the program when we try to attract a company. And
yes.
So I just wondered when that would be updated.
Okay, well, since the signing of the bill, I believe it will be 4 weeks this Tuesday, since the Lieutenant Governor happened to sign that legislation. We have to wait for the clean copy of the bill from OLS. To the best of my knowledge, we've been checking for it daily. We haven't gotten that as of yet. So if you go to the legislative website, you'll still see the version with all the changes and everything that's listed until the clean copy comes out. there are so many things that we're looking towards working with, and I'm chairing here at divisional level an entity called the Working Group. The Working Group is the one that's working on these regulations and everything that are going to be in place. We didn't want to just with the old brochures to put out just the old data without knowing what the modifications were going to be. So I can probably say to you, realistically, we're probably going to be looking towards the first of the year before revised brochures are going to go out. Hopefully, what can happen is if you're giving out or you still have a supply of the old brochures, you're giving them out, and by talking with the local coordinators or calling our office here and having them speak with me, I can hopefully try to clarify some of the things that have changed. But we are looking towards updating those things as soon as we know for sure what those changes are.
Because I think the developer incentives are kind of significant.
Yes.
That you alluded to, versus the manufacturer who's buying new computer equipment. And those are very different incentives, and it would be important to know that.
Yes.
I very much appreciate that. Do you anticipate any changes in urban enterprise zone boundaries, or that everything's just going to stay the same? Just trying to ask.
Oh, no. Listen. Over the past, I would probably say 8 to 10 months, there have been at least 12 or 13 different versions of bills. There was one proposal that was going to double the size of the UEZ program from 37 municipalities, 32 zones to nearly 72 zones statewide. And so many people that have been involved from the beginning have having all this information jumbled in their heads, trying to remember what was a part of one program, what was a part of another. And some of the things that you and others have mentioned that have come into play about limitations on things, that was in some instances how they could justify paying for the program by limiting some of those things. What ultimately came up in the last 2 to 3 months, the UEZ division, the state office was brought into the equation. And then the modified bill pretty much came up with something that was functional and working. And that's pretty much where we are now. But those memories were still in people's heads. Hey, is this still there? Is that still there? Because so many things were being offered that are not a part of the final bill. So, our phones have been ringing off the hook with inquiries and questions. Entities like Ernst & Young and Price Waterhouse Cooper that represent a lot of big businesses, they're calling. I've been talking with their parties, trying to sort through a number of these things. So that's going to be an ongoing process for a while, probably until we get to the first of the year.
Thank you, James.
You're very welcome.
Anyone else for either James or Maggie? I think I saw Glenn. There we go. Glenn has a question.
Yeah, for the improvements grant that's the second coming out, would murals be eligible?
Mural?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And the follow-up is, I had to take a call during a couple of your slides, but so I might have missed it. Is there a form yet for the first one that's being rolled out, or an application criteria or website to apply on yet, or is that forthcoming?
It's forthcoming. The application's not open yet.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Do you have an ETA on those, Maggie?
Well, we're thinking like mid-October, but there's a lot like with IDA and everything coming up. It's really hard to say exactly when.
Okay. Glenn, just so you know, I'm going to post those slides, which do lay out very nicely all of the eligibility requirements and all of the everything. And I'm sure Maggie will let us know, as soon as she knows when the applications are going to be posted, and we'll share that information out.
And I encourage people to go on EDA's homepage and put your email into the newsletter, which is right at the bottom. That way you're getting updates on every application that's going to open.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? I think both of our speakers did a very good job of laying everything out for us.
Thank you.
So if not, I'm going to let everybody go and hope you will join us next week for a discussion about brownfields. And again, if anybody has ideas for conference space we're looking January again, let me know. We'll be in touch. So thank you again, Maggie and James. We really appreciate it.